Orchestrated character names, plot mechanics, and financial details for revenge memoir. Orchestrated character names, plot mechanics, and financial details for revenge memoir. The thing about my father's house is that the heating vents carry sound better than anyone who ever lived in it. I learned that when I was 9, lying on the floor of the upstairs hall with my ear against the brass grate, listening to him tell my mother she'd married down and stayed there. I learned it again at 31, standing in that same hallway in a coat I hadn't taken off, holding a bottle of wine I'd brought like an idiot, listening to him laugh about me. She still rents, my father said. Bourbon warm, easy, the voice he uses on juries and golf partners. 31 years old and she rents a one-bedroom in a building with a laundromat in the basement. I send her money on her birthday and I'm half convinced she spends it on cat food. I don't think she even has a cat, my sister said, and the room laughed, the loose kind of laugh that comes after the second pour. I stood there. I didn't move. I'd driven 90 minutes for this dinner because my father had called me himself, which he never did, and said the words family meeting in a tone that I, fool that I am, had heard as a thawing, as if maybe this was the year he finally wanted to know me. The point is, my brother-in-law said, my sister's husband, the one who works in private wealth at a firm whose name he drops like loose change. The point is, she'll sign. She doesn't read anything. She didn't read the lease on that apartment. She didn't read the terms when she let you co-sign that card in college. We put a number in front of her, she cries a little, she signs, and Dad's problem goes away by Friday. Don't make it sound ugly, my father said. It's not ugly. It's family. We just need her to be grateful for once in her life. I want to tell you I was surprised. I wasn't. What I felt, standing on the runner in that cold hall, was something closer to relief. The relief of finally seeing the shape of a thing you've been bumping into in the dark for years. They didn't misjudge me. They needed me small. A person they understood. A person who rents and cries and signs. What none of them knew, because I had spent 6 years making sure they didn't, was that I had not needed my father's birthday money since I was 25. What they didn't know was that the company they thought was my little tech thing, the one my sister called my hobby at Thanksgiving while she refilled her wine, had 240 employees, contracts with 11 of the largest hospital systems in the country. And in S1 sitting with the SEC, what they didn't know was that in 9 days the company I built in the laundromat basement years of my life was going public on the NASDAQ, and the number the bankers kept circling in their decks had a B in it. They called me a renter. They were right. I rent the apartment on purpose. It's 3 blocks from my first office and I'm sentimental in ways I don't advertise. I could have bought the building. I could have bought the block. I set the wine down on the side table in the hall, very quietly, and I left without saying I'd come. I sat in my car in the dark at the end of the long gravel drive, and I did not cry, which surprised me, because I'd been a person who cried in that driveway for most of my life. I called the one person who knew everything. He picked up on the first ring, because he always does when it's 9 days out from an IPO. "You're supposed to be at dinner," my advisor said. "Quentin has been my CFO and the closest thing I have to a conscience for 4 years. How was the warm family embrace?" "They want to take Loon Lake," I said. There was a silence on the line that I felt in my teeth. He knew what Loon Lake was. Everyone close to me knows. "Tell me exactly what you heard," he said, and I did. My grandfather built the cabin at Loon Lake with his own hands the summer after he came home from Korea, and he left it to me, only to me, in an irrevocable trust, because he was the one person in my family who looked at me and didn't see a deficit. He was a machinist by trade. He had hands like tree roots and a temper like a struck match. And he was the one who set a busted-up second-hand laptop in front of me when I was 12 and said, "Figure it out. That's the whole job. Just figure things out." He taught me to gut a fish and to wire an outlet and to never ever sign my name to a thing I hadn't read with my own eyes. There was a board over the cabin door he'd carved with a chisel. "Bill, what they can take." I used to think it was about the cabin. I understand now that it was about me. He died 4 years ago. My father and sister came to the funeral in black that still had the tags tucked in, cried for the people watching, And 3 weeks later asked me when I was going to do something with the cabin since it was just sitting there. I'd said I'd keep it. They'd looked at me like I was hoarding. Okay, Quentin said, slow, the way he gets when he's already 3 moves ahead. Here's what you need to understand, and I need you to actually hear it tonight and not your version where you make it nobody's fault. Your father is in real trouble. I had a feeling, so I had counsel pull what's public. There's a judgment against him from that real estate partnership that went sideways in 2019, and a settlement from a malpractice claim against his firm that he personally guaranteed. Conservatively, he's $3.5 million in the hole, and the people he owes are not the patient kind. That's his problem. It becomes yours the second you ring that bell. His voice sharpened. Margot, listen to me. In 9 days, your name is on a public filing next to a net worth. Right now, you're a private person, and they can't touch you. The day you're a known billionaire, every creditor your father has, and your father himself, starts looking at the family balance sheet. There are co-signed instruments in your history. That college card. A loan you guaranteed for your sister's first practice that you think was paid off, and I'm not sure was. They will argue commingling, they will argue family obligation, and even when they lose, and they'd probably lose, you spend 3 years in a portrait in a courtroom with your face in the business pages. The clean move, the only clean move, is a full neutral release. Everybody waives everybody. Before the bell. In writing, notarized. I sat with that. Out past the windshield, the porch lights of my father's house glowed gold and cruel through the trees. They're already drafting paperwork, I said. He's having his guy write up a settlement. They want me to sign over Lone Lake and my trust distribution to cover his debt, and they're going to hand me $40,000 and call it a fresh start. I heard Quentin breathe out. Then don't fight the paperwork, he said. Offer to pay for it. I didn't understand, and then I did, all at once. The way the answer to a problem you've been staring at for hours sometimes just falls into place. I started, for the first time that whole black night, to feel warm. Say more, I said. Tell your father you want to make it easy. Tell him you're embarrassed. You don't want a fight. You don't want lawyers nickel and dimming the family. You'll cover the legal costs yourself and have it all drawn up clean. People who think you're stupid love it when you offer to pay for things. He'll let your counsel draft the whole instrument because it saves him a retainer and because he can't imagine you'd be the dangerous one in the room. He paused. And whatever release we put in there, it goes both directions. They release all claims against you. And you release all claims against them, including any equity, any friends and family allocation, any promised participation in the company. Mutual. Total. My stomach turned over once because here was the part. The friends and family shares, I said. You promised them, Margot. 4 years ago. At that dinner you told me about, when you were trying to make peace, you told your father and your brother-in-law that if the thing ever went public, they'd get a friends and family allocation. And your brother-in-law, who is not a smart man but is a greedy one, has remembered it every single day since. He's a wealth guy. He knows an F&F slot in a hot IPO is the closest thing to free money there is. He will insist that the settlement protect the family's right to those shares. He'll want it in there. He'll fight to put it in. And we let him, I said. We let him put in his clause. And in the same instrument, on a page he won't read because it's past the money, we put a mutual release that voids every family equity claim the instant the inheritance transfer executes. He'll be so busy guarding the front door he won't notice we walk the house out the back. They take the cabin, they take your trust. And the moment they sign for it, they sign away the allocation. When the stock prints, they'll have given up a fortune to win 800 grand of lake property and your grandfather's chisel marks. How much? I said. The allocation. What did I promise them? You said 5% of the friends and family pool. The pool's $1 million too. So 60,000 shares. He went quiet and I knew he was running it. We're going to price around 26. The book is monstrously oversubscribed. I think we closed day one north of 100. Call it 60,000 shares at 100 plus. Another beat. It's $7-8 million they're going to sign away. Maybe more if it runs. I should tell you that in that moment I felt clean and powerful and certain, and part of me did. But mostly what I felt was grief. Sitting in a dark car at the bottom of a driveway I'd been crying in since I was a kid, doing math on the price of my own family's contempt. They were going to hand away $8 million to take a lake cabin from the only person who'd ever loved them for free. And they were going to feel like they'd won. Draft it, I said. You're sure? I looked at the porch lights. He told them I should be grateful, I said. Draft it. The next morning, I did the hardest acting of my life, which is to say, I called my father and I made my voice small. Dad, I said, I've been thinking about what you wanted to talk about. I let it wobble. I know things have been hard. I don't want to be a burden. I want to make it easy for everyone. I heard the smile come into his voice. That's very mature, sweetheart. Sweetheart? He'd called me that maybe 4 times in my life, always right before he took something. I'd like to pay for the paperwork, I said. I don't want lawyers fighting over family. I have a little saved. Let me have it drawn up properly so nobody can ever say it wasn't fair. And then we can all just move forward. I think that's the right attitude, he said, warm as a furnace. I really do. You've always been the soft one. Your brother-in-law will want to look it over, of course. He understands these things. Of course, I said. Whatever he needs in there, I want him to feel good about it. I could practically hear my brother-in-law leaning into the speakerphone in the background. Tell her about the allocation, he said, not even bothering to lower his voice. Ah, yes, my father said. There's the matter of your little company. Your brother-in-law thinks, and I agree, that whatever you might owe the family from that should be protected, formalized. You did make a promise, years ago. I did, I said softly. I remember. You should have what I promised. It's only right. Put it in. I want it in there. Good girl, my brother-in-law said, and I closed my eyes and let it sit on me like a hand on the back of the neck, because in 8 days it was going to be the most expensive thing he ever said. I had my attorney draft the instrument. I read every word of it myself, twice, at the desk in my real office, with the city going dark in the windows, because my grandfather taught me to never sign a thing I hadn't read with my own eyes, and I was not about to ask anyone to walk into a trap I hadn't checked the floor of first. It was clean. It was legal. It was theirs to read and theirs to ignore. My brother-in-law's clause sat right up front, page 2, in bold, where the money lived. The family shall retain all rights to friends and family equity participation as previously represented. He'd be able to point to it. He'd feel like a genius. The release sat on page 11, in the dense grey middle where settlements always bury the teeth, in language no different from 100 other releases. The parties mutually, irrevocably, and finally release any and all claims, present or future, known or unknown, including without limitation any claim to equity, allocation, distribution, or participation in any entity controlled by any party, such release to take effect upon execution and recording of the property transfers contemplated herein. In plain English, the second they recorded the deed to my grandfather's cabin, the front door promise on page 2 turned to ash, voided by the same signature that took the cabin. You couldn't have one without the other. They were going to sign both with the same pen and read neither. 2 days before the bell, my sister did the thing I should have expected and somehow didn't. She posted a photo of me, an old one from a holiday years back, taken in the bad apartment before the bad apartment was a choice. Me at 24, hollow-eyed, hair scraped back, hunched over the same beat-up laptop my grandfather gave me, surrounded by take-out containers and sticky notes. The wreck of a person who hadn't slept in 3 days because the first version of the product kept crashing and a hospital in Cleveland was depending on it not to. I remember that night. I remember crying over a stacked trace at 4 in the morning and then fixing the bug at 4:40 and feeling for one clean minute like maybe I was somebody. She captioned it, "Throwback to my baby sis in her startup era. Hinch, some of us never grow out of the dorm room. Love you anyway. Family first." The comments came fast. People we grew up with. An aunt who hadn't called me in a decade writing praying she finds her way. Kruh. A cousin who still owes me $4,000 from a bridge loan 2 years ago, suggesting, with 3 laughing emojis, that it was time someone staged an intervention. My father's golf friends. Women my sister did spin class with. 200 and some likes, all of them looking at a tired girl at 4 in the morning and seeing a failure. I sat with my phone face down on the desk for a long time. I want to be honest with you, it worked. For about an hour, it worked exactly the way they meant it to. I felt 24 again. I felt small and ashamed and behind. And then I picked the phone back up and I looked at that girl in the photo, the one they were all laughing at, and I thought about what she didn't know yet. That the thing crashing on her screen would one day flag a medication error that would have killed a man in a hospital she'd never see. That the people laughing at her takeout containers would never once in their lives build a thing that saved a stranger's life. And the shame just drained out of me and left something quiet and level behind. My grandfather had a word for the feeling. He called it settled, as in, you're settled now, kid. Stop wobbling. I was settled. The signing was set for 3 in the afternoon on IPO day, which my brother-in-law surely thought was clever. Get it done before the close, before anything could change, and which was, in fact, the most generous gift he could have given me. My father had also, with a kind of theatrical cruelty I'd stopped being shocked by, scheduled it the same day as his big event, a retirement/legacy gala he was throwing for himself at the Tarot Club, the old stone golf club where my family had been members since before I was born. The kind of place where the bar still runs a tab and the parking lot is all German engineering. 200 guests, a string trio. He was going to sign away my inheritance in the club library at 3 and toast to his own greatness on the terrace at 4. He wanted me there for both. He wanted me to watch. I dressed for it carefully. Not in armor exactly, in truth. A charcoal suit cut to fit, the first genuinely expensive thing I'd ever bought myself, the one I wear when I have to make a roomful of investors believe a woman they've never heard of is worth more than all of them. My grandfather's watch, a cheap steel Timex, scratched to hell, worth nothing and everything. I left the diamonds in the drawer. I didn't need them. I knew what I was worth, and so, finally, did the only person whose opinion had ever mattered, and he was dead, and he'd known it before anyone. Quentin texted me at 2:15. Book's done. We priced at 26. Opens in an hour. You good? I've been good for years, I wrote back. They just didn't get the memo. The club library smelled like leather and lemon polish and 40 years of cigars that weren't supposed to be smoked indoors. My father sat behind the big walnut table like it was a bench, and he was the judge. His attorney stood beside him with a face you'd forget in an elevator. My sister perched on the table's edge, phone already in her hand. And my brother-in-law leaned against the bookshelves with his arms crossed, and that look bankers get, the one that thinks the whole world is his spread, and he's the one who gets to market. Thank you for being reasonable about this, my father said. I sat. I made myself smaller in the chair than I am. I folded my hands. I let my shoulders round in the way they used to in this family, the posture of a girl who'd been taught her whole life to take up less room. The attorney slid the document across the table. 26 pages, heavy stock, bound. Family settlement and mutual release. Now, my father said, gentle as a knife going in slow, I know this is a lot of pages, sweetheart, and I know reading all that legal language isn't your strong suit. The important parts are simple. We're releasing $40,000 to you to help you get on your feet. In exchange, the family consolidates the assets to handle some obligations. You won't even notice the difference, and you'll have a cushion you've never had before. You should feel good about this. A lot of fathers wouldn't do this much. And the lake place? My sister said, not looking up from her phone. Honestly, we'd be doing you a favor. You can't afford the taxes on it anyway. It's just sitting there full of Grandpa's junk. Junk. The chisel marks over the door. The laptop. The board that said build. What they can tack. I kept my face soft. I turned the pages slowly, the way someone does when they can't really read them. Page 2. The friends and family clause, bold, exactly where my brother-in-law had put his greedy little flag. I let my finger rest on it. That part, I said, looking up at him, wide-eyed. That's the part about my company. You're sure that's okay? You really want that? My brother-in-law smiled like I'd asked him if he wanted the last donut. That's the part protecting the family, sweetheart. That stays. You promised us, remember? We're just making sure a promise is a promise. You wouldn't go back on family." "No," I said. "I wouldn't. Leave it in." He looked for a moment almost fond of me, like a man patting a dog that had finally learned to shake. I kept turning. I let my hand tremble. That part I didn't have to fake. My hands were shaking, just not from fear. And I reached page 11, the grey middle, the teeth, and I let my eyes slide right over it the way they expected me to, and I turned past it like it was nothing. "This is very fair," the attorney said, in the voice of a man who has notarized 1,000 terrible things and cashed every check. I got to the signature page. The pen sat there, my father's good fountain pen, the one he signs his client's ruin with. "Can I have a copy?" I asked small. "Just for my records. Grandpa always said keep your records." My father rolled his eyes, but the attorney said it was standard, better even. 2 duplicate originals, both parties executed, and pulled a second bound copy from his bag. So I signed the first, then the second. My signature wobbled on both, broken looking, a frightened girl's hand. My father signed. The attorney pressed his notary seal down with 2 heavy, final clunks. My brother-in-law signed his witness, fast, barely looking, already mentally counting his 60,000 shares. Nobody read page 11. Nobody read past the money. They never do. I folded my copy and held it to my chest like a blanket and said, "Thank you, Dad." And he said, "There." Now was that so hard, and stood up and clapped his attorney on the shoulder and went to go be celebrated. I checked my grandfather's scratched-up Timex. 3:51. 9 minutes. The terrace at the Tarot Club looks out over the 18th green, and by 4 o'clock it was full. 200 people, in the kind of clothes that cost what other people's cars cost, holding champagne, half of them in finance, which mattered, because half of them had their phones out checking the clothes. My father stood at a little podium with a microphone, glowing. My sister beside him angling her phone for the live stream, 15,000 of her followers watching her father be important. "To legacy," my father said, and the terrace lifted its glasses. "To building something that lasts. You know, people throw the word entrepreneur around, but real builders are rare. Take the company everyone's been buzzing about today, Veraxis, going public this afternoon. Now that's the real thing. Vision, discipline, the kind of grit you can't teach." He chuckled, comfortable, the master of the room. "Not the kind of thing you get from playing on a laptop in a basement, am I right?" The laugh he wanted rolled across the terrace. A few people glanced at me where I stood near the back, the rented apartment hotel, and looked away. 4 o'clock. Somewhere 200 miles south, a bell rang on a floor I'd stood on at 6 that morning, and the universe dipped. Phones went off all over the terrace at once. A wealth manager near the bar said, loud, "Holy Veraxis closed at 1:04. Someone else, "It opened at 26. Someone else, "That's a 4x on day 1. Who runs that thing?" The string trio stumbled and stopped. My brother-in-law, 3 feet from the podium, pulled out his phone, and I watched his banker's brain start to do banker's math, watched it land on the friends and family allocation he'd just fought so hard to protect, watched the first flicker of pure animal joy cross his face. Quentin came up the terrace steps in a grey suit with a bound copy of our S1 under his arm, unhurried, the way he moves when a deal has already closed in his favor. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "Forgive the interruption," he said, and somehow the whole terrace heard him. "There's a small correction to the program." He looked at my father. "You mentioned Veraxis. I'd like to introduce its founder and chief executive, who's operated under her initials, M.E. Vane, for privacy reasons until this morning." He turned. He held out his hand toward the back of the terrace. Toward me. "Margot," he said, "would you join us?" I have replayed the next 10 seconds more times than I'll admit. The way the sound left the terrace all at once, like water pulled back before a wave. The way 200 faces turned, the recognition crawling across them in slow motion. The way my sister's phone dipped 3 inches in her hand and then steadied, still streaming, catching her own face as it came apart, and 15,000 strangers watching it happen live. The way my father's color drained out of him from the top down, all that bourbon confidence going grey. "Marco?" someone whispered. And I watched my father's mouth shape it too. And I knew exactly what he was doing, because I'd watched him do it in courtrooms my whole life, recalculating, pivoting, finding the new angle. He found it fast. Of course he did. My daughter, he boomed, arms opening, striding toward me. I always said she had it in her. I stepped back. One clean step. His arms closed on the cool evening air, and he stood there with them open and nothing in them, which is, when I think about it, the truest picture of him I have. He pivoted again, faster now, desperate, turning to Quentin. The friends and family shares, he said, low and quick. There's an allocation, the family's allocation. Margot promised we have it in writing. And there it was. The donut. He'd reached for it himself. I took my folded copy out of my jacket. I unfolded it slowly in front of everyone and held it up so the people closest could see the notary seal, the witness line, my father's own signature, my brother-in-law's beneath it. You're right, I said, and my voice came out level and carrying, the voice I use in a boardroom right before I end something. There is an allocation. Page 2. You fought to keep it in. I let you. I looked at my brother-in-law. His face had stopped doing anything at all. Would you like to read page 11? Or should I? Nobody answered. The trio didn't pretend to play. I read it, the mutual release. The whole gray, dense, irrevocable thing. The part about any claim to equity, allocation, distribution, or participation. The part where the release takes effect upon execution and recording of the property transfers, which my father's own attorney had filed an hour ago at 3:55, because he was efficient and had a 4 o'clock somewhere else. The transfer recorded at 3:55, I said, which means the release is in effect, which means the allocation on page 2, the one you wouldn't let me leave out, voided itself 55 minutes ago. I let it land. You signed it away. To take a lake cabin. My brother-in-law made a sound. It wasn't a word. Quentin, because he is a numbers man and lives for exactly this, stepped in with the figure, calm as a weather report. The family allocation was 60,000 shares. At today's close, that's a little over $6 million. He paused. It was 8 when we drafted. It ran. $6 million. For my grandfather's cabin and a chisel mark over a door. The terrace heard the number and breathed it out all at once. My sister was still live streaming. I'll never know if she realized it. 15,000 people watched the moment understanding finished its work on her face. I folded the document back up and slid it into my jacket. I looked at my father. At the open hands, at the gray skin, at a man who had spent my whole life teaching me I should be grateful and had never once in 31 years said I'm proud of you without a price tag attached. There's one more thing you should hear since everyone's here, I said. That Axis won't be renewing its services agreement with your firm. I'd checked. They used us, ironically, 2 layers down through a vendor for their record security, effective at the next cycle. Consider it a risk reassessment, a small thing, a clean, surgical, public thing in front of his partners and the judges he golfs with and every person whose good opinion was the only currency he ever actually valued. I set my untouched champagne on the nearest table. Enjoy the party, I said. It's the last thing I'll let you put on my tab. I walked out through the parted, staring crowd, down the stone steps across the lot, to the car where my head of security held the door without a word, and I got in, and the door shut with a heavy, final sound, and behind me on the terrace 200 phones were already lifting. The story already spreading through every network that made up the entire world my father had ever cared about. 3 days later, I let the rest of it close. I'd set up a holding company the spring before, when I first felt the family circling. A quiet entity with a name nobody would connect to me. When my father's creditors came calling on his $3.5 million, my holding company was already there, having quietly bought the note against the very mortgage Loon Lake had been pledged to, back when he'd tried to borrow against assets that were never his. His claim on the cabin had been contingent on a settlement he'd violated the instant page 11 took effect. So the deed came back, clean, recorded in a name that turned out to be mine. The cabin was mine again. It had never really been anyone else's. My father's attorney called. I let it go to voicemail and listened in the car threats of litigation. Words like elder abuse and undue influence and manipulating a confused man, a man who, I'll remind you, had spent 40 years winning cases by understanding exactly which page people don't read. I saved the voicemail evidence. My grandfather taught me that too. I texted back one line: "You witnessed the signature, counsel notarized it, it's recorded, we're done." And I blocked the number. My sister's voicemail came next. I played 3 seconds. "After everything this family, how could you?" I deleted it. Then she texted. Then my cousin who owes me $4,000 texted. Then an aunt. Then the group chat lit up with 40 messages I never opened. And I changed my number, which took about 4 minutes, and gave the new one to the 11 people on earth who'd earned it. I drove up to Loon Lake that weekend, alone, and let myself in with the key my grandfather pressed into my hand the summer before he died, closing my 12-year-old fingers around the teeth of it like he was handing me something heavier than brass. The cabin smelled like cold wood smoke and pine, and faintly still like him. His junk, my sister called it. His tools were on the wall where he left them. The old laptop was in the closet, dead, and I'll never throw it away. The board over the doors still said what it said, the cuts of his chisel as sharp as the day he made them, and I stood under it for a long time. I have a glass building now with my name on it in steel letters that catch the morning sun, and a few hundred people who bet their careers on a tired girl with takeout containers and turned out to be right, and they are, in every way that the word is supposed to mean. My family. The one I built instead of the one I was handed. But the cabin is where I go when I need to remember that I was somebody before any of them noticed, and that I'll be somebody long after they finished being sorry for the wrong reasons. They told me I should be grateful. I am, finally, to one old man with root-knuckled hands who looked at a wobbling kid and saw something worth a chisel mark. The rest of them got exactly what they signed for. I read every page. They never read past the money. They never do. For most of my life, I thought the smart move was to stay quiet and keep paying. Pay off the card, pay off the loan, pay for the legal work, smooth every edge so nobody in my family ever had to feel the weight of their own choices. I called it love. My grandfather would have called it something blunter. He used to say that a thing only stands if it's built on something true, and a family that needs you to be small isn't a family. It's a debt collector with a last name. The reason it ended the way it did wasn't luck, and it wasn't revenge in the way people mean when they say the word. My father lost $6 million because he could not imagine that the daughter he'd taught to feel grateful for crumbs had read every page while he read none. My brother-in-law fought to keep the clause that ruined him because greed makes a person certain, and certainty makes a person stop reading. My sister filmed her own face falling apart because she had spent years building an audience for my humiliation and never once considered the camera might turn. None of that was fate. It was cause and effect, the slow arithmetic of who they chose to be, finally coming due in one afternoon. What I want you to take from this isn't that I won. It's how the win was even possible. It came from refusing to become cruel in the small daily ways they were cruel, from keeping my word even inside a trap, from putting a real release in front of them instead of a lie, so that everything I did would hold up in the cold lowered a conscience. It came from learning the actual mechanics of the thing, the law, the filing, the timing of a bell, instead of just feeling wronged about it, because feelings don't record a deed at 3:55, but knowledge does. And it came from the plain, unglamorous grit of those laundromat basement years, the 4 in the morning bugs, the version of me my sister mocked online, the girl who kept going when nobody clapped. You don't need a company or an IPO for any of that. You need to be honest when lying would be easier, to actually understand the things that frighten you instead of looking away from them, and to keep showing up on the nights no one is watching. Build the quiet competence first. Stay decent while you do it, and then outlast the people who mistook your patience for weakness. I still drive up to Lone Lake alone sometimes. I stand under my grandfather's carving, and I think about the wobbling kid he handed a busted laptop to, and I understand now that he wasn't telling me to build a house. He was telling me to become someone they couldn't take apart. I did. So can you. Read every page. Stay kind where you can. And never ever sign your name to a life you didn't write yourself.